So I was doing a little bit of research for Hasty Headlines today. It's Friday the 13th, September 13th, 2019, and we just had the Democratic debates last night, the third round with the top 10 contenders. Obviously, one of them was Beto O'Rourke. And so I'm doing research for what I'm going to talk about on Hasty Headlines today, and I come across this story on CNN. Now, it's CNN, so a lot of the times I'm only half willing to actually trust anything that they point out. But I come across this article that says Beto O'Rourke just did Republicans a massive favor on guns, and I had to admit I agree with that statement. And so I decided I would read through the article and see if they're saying the same things that I'm thinking, and they are. It goes on to talk about how his best moment in the debate was where he doubled down on his statements that he will come and take AR-15s and AK-47s and weapons designed for the battlefield away from American citizens. He also doubled and tripled down again on it this morning in several interviews after the debates from last night. Now, keep in mind, by the way, almost every gun on the face of the planet was designed for some form of combat or defense against other human beings, a quote-unquote weapon of war, or weapons for the battlefield, or military weapons, or law enforcement weapons. There are very, very few, relatively speaking, very few firearms that were not originally designed to be used against people. There are some firearms out there that, after the invention had been around for a while, were specifically designed for, let's say, hunting, or specifically designed for, let's say, sports shooting. Okay, but the vast majority of firearms, even bolt-action rifles, lever-action rifles, old-school single-action revolvers, were all originally designed to be used against people. So when you say you're going to go after anything that is a weapon of war or something to be used on the battlefield, that's pretty much every gun. But I digress here just a little bit. This article basically goes in to explain that this was a great moment for people who are for Beto O'Rourke, or people like CNN who are leftists and they have an agenda of being anti-gun. But is it really good going into an election year? And I would say, is it good? Is it really good for people who actually are anti-gun when you go out in front of everybody, in front of the entire country, and exclaim, as a Democrat candidate for President of the United States, that you will take away guns from people? Because here's the thing, as this article will point out, for a long time, the Republicans, the NRA, the GOA, all these more right-wing or conservative or libertarian groups have been saying the left and the Democrats want to take your guns. And everybody who's gotten up on a stage somewhere to run for some office, whether it's president, senator, congressman, anywhere, when they've been confronted with those questions, by and large, for decades now, every Democrat politician, Clinton, Obama, Hillary Clinton, they all stood up and said, no, 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 we don't want to take your guns. I mean, maybe background checks or something like that. But no, don't worry. That's just an NRA talking point. The evil NRA, they're just trying to scare you into not voting for us. And then this. And not only that, but when you watched the debates, which unfortunately I did, and it was painful and ridiculous, but I did, nobody on that stage, outside of, I believe it was Amy Klobuchar, disagreed with him on that. And she simply said, well, yeah, we need to take the guns, but it shouldn't be mandatory. We should just do a voluntary buyback program to try and get the guns back. All the other candidates didn't disagree with Beto O'Rourke. So you now have an entire field of candidates on the Democrat side ready to go up against Donald Trump in an election year. And all of them are basically saying they want to confiscate your guns. They're basically affirming what the Republicans, what the NRA, what everybody who cares about liberty and freedom has been saying about them for the better part of 4 decades now. They basically just come out and said it. And how does that affect gun rights? How does that affect going into the next presidential election? Well, I think it speaks volumes, in my opinion, of how people are going to go into this election viewing those Democrats, whoever ends up being the nominee. Look, by and large in this country, while there are many people who do actually want quote-unquote common sense gun reform, almost no one in the country, even though the vocal opposition would tell you otherwise, almost no one in the country wants gun confiscations from law-abiding citizens. Even moderates who lean slightly left don't want that. So this is a big talking point. This is a big step for the Democrat Party as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of you out there should be concerned. Even CNN is pointing out that this may not be a good move going into an election year against Donald Trump. Because when you talk about stuff like this, when you talk about outright confiscation of firearms, and they were talking about registration, confiscation, background checks, red flag laws, all this stuff. When you talk about that going into an election year, you make people want to go more towards the right. You make people want to go more towards whoever is not saying that they want to confiscate firearms from law-abiding citizens. And on top of that, something I'll add to this is it makes people who are pro-Second Amendment stand up and fight for their rights. And it even points it out in this article. It says back from 2008 on up, gun sales under Obama's reign skyrocketed. Why? Because the threat was real. And because gun sales skyrocketed and people stood up for their rights, nothing actually got passed. And you notice now that Trump is president, we actually have seen some anti-gun things come to pass because people got lazy again. But then you throw up Beto O'Rourke and all his cohorts running for president of the United States out there willingly saying they will come and take your gun. So, will this change the course of the election? Did this just give Trump a much better chance of winning? Will this make all of you go out there and fight a little bit harder or maybe a whole lot harder for your Second Amendment rights? I don't know for sure, but I think it's a pretty good chance that the answer could be yes.